Hello, my name is Lorraine Whale, and I'm a genealogist based on the border of West Sussex and Hampshire, and I'm presenting a whistle-stop tour of manorial records in 10 minutes. By the end of this tour, I hope you will want to explore these remarkable records for your own family history and house history research. These records include people from all walks of life, from wealthy landowners to families who just had one cottage and a small plot of land. This presentation shows manors in Sussex and mainly follows a family called Cheeseman. So let's start with the manor itself. What is a manor? A manor is a unit of land that's owned by a person referred to as the lord of the manor. A manor varied in size and could be made up of one or more villages. But the manor was run just like a business, and like all businesses, records were kept. There were many different types of record, but I'm going to focus on the court dealing with property and land transfer and the courts dealing with behaviours. Now, this gorgeous plan of 1808 shows the estates of the Lord of the Manor of Findon. You can see the buildings drawn in red and grey, and you can see in green the copy holders who paid rent to the Lord of the Manor. John Boyce, at the bottom, was a copy holder of Downhouse Field, measuring 2 acres, 3 perches and 33 roods. The court at which property transactions were discussed and recorded was the court baron. A court baron was usually held every 3 months. It was chaired by the lord or his steward and would be attended by the manorial tenants. And one of the main purposes of the court baron was to deal with property transactions. Whenever a property or plot of land changed hands, a process called surrender and admission took place, and it went like this. The current property owner would need to first return or surrender the property back to the lord of the manor. This could give the lord of the manor a chance to check ownership details, review the rent, or to vet the new tenant. If everything was okay, then the new property owner would be admitted to the property. The new property owner and the lord of the manor would both receive a copy of the details of the transfer to prove ownership, and this is where the term copy holder comes from. After the court, all property transactions were written into a ledger called a court book. The entry would give the date of the transaction, the name of the parties involved, and a description of the property. Personal details were often recorded, and you might find details of the relationships between the parties, their ages, and sometimes their occupations. The snippets pictured here show the court baron of the Manor of Amberley on the 25th of March 1814. And we can see that John Cheeseman was admitted to a property on the death of his father William. And it shows that the customs of the manor were that the youngest son inherited. Details of 3 properties were described, which was a bit of a surprise as I was expecting William to have owned just one cottage. But the cottages he owned were called Ridge House, the Lower House, and another called Potter's, each of which had half an acre of land. The court books are set out in a fairly similar format. Each court starts with the date, whose court it was, who was chairing it, and who was in attendance. After this, the detail of the transactions are written, so once you've got your eye into how the courts work and how the descriptions of the land are written, they're fairly easy to navigate. And if you're lucky, there can be an index at the beginning or end of each court book, giving the names of the people involved in the property transactions. This example here shows the Manor Court of Amberley in Sussex on the 29th of October 1774, before Francis Dean, who was the Lord of the Manor's steward. The homage, also called the jury, was a group of local men of the manor who, in simple terms, were witnesses to the proceedings and would determine any fines, etc., for tenants brought before the courts for misdemeanours. The next courts we'll move on to are those that give an insight into the day-to-day lives of the people living in the manor and the rules that they had to live by. Now, these rules were called the customs of the manor, otherwise known as how we do things around here. These manorial customs were set by the lord of the manor and were practices and regulations that governed the life within the manor. In early times, these matters were handled in a separate customary court, but over time, the customary court and the court baron merged into one. And another court you'll come across as you explore these records is the Leet Court. And it was at the Leet Court that individuals were called for committing minor offences. These could range from failing to repair hedges or grazing cattle in the wrong place. Individuals might also be called to the court for fighting, drunkenness, and even gossiping. And the Leet Court would also record the names of local officials, such as constables. Here are some examples. The entry of the Leet Court on the left shows a list of tithing men of the Chidham Manor in 1795. And the entry on the right gives an example of manorial customs. The entries state that if tenants failed to attend the court, they would be fined a penny each. And it shows that the tenants weren't allowed to cut down oak or beech trees, but they could help themselves to the elm and ash trees. And you can see that the manorial tenants were allowed to fish in the brook. Now, like many other records, there are challenges, and manorial records are no different. While it's possible to get a run of records from the 12th to the 20th century, inevitably there are gaps, and some manors may actually have no surviving records. The quality of record keeping can be good, and it can also be very poor, and the writing can also be very difficult to read. And there's Latin. Records before 1733 are in Latin, but don't let that put you off. With a little self-tuition, it is possible to pick out names and details. The snippets in this picture relate to a house history I did for a property that used to be a pub called the Anchor. Even with only a little Latin knowledge, I could see that the year was 1716. The name of the person surrendering the property was John Burchett, and that the property was the Anchor. And because the entries are set out in a similar format, whether in English or Latin, I knew how the property and plot of land were described. This meant I could translate most of the paragraph with books that have been written to help family and local historians to translate Latin. So where do you find them? The best place to start is the Manorial Documents Register, which is available online and is maintained by the National Archives. If you don't know the name of the manor, just type in the name of the parish and the county. This will give you a list of manors in that parish. This example is for Amberley, and you can see the date ranges from 1275 to 1937. There are 56 collections in 6 different places, including the West Sussex Records Office, Arundel Castle, and the National Archives. So be prepared to travel. If you want to explore manorial records or learn Latin from the comfort of your own home, there are some online resources you can use. Family Search has some manorial records online, so you can click through them and familiarise yourself with the format and terminology used. I was pleased to find some manorial records for West Sussex. There are also 2 websites I always refer to: the Nottingham University Manuscripts and Special Collections and the website of the Cumbrian Manorial Records Project. Both are excellent websites which have an incredible amount of information to help you to demystify manorial records. So this is the result of my journey with the manorial records of Amberley. This is a picture of the cottage in which the Cheeseman family lived from the 1650s to the middle of the 19th century. The records of the manor helped me to discover that the family owned and farmed several plots of land, and I learnt about how the Cheeseman family lived, who their neighbours were, and how the small village in the manor of Amberley had changed over 200 years. So I hope you've enjoyed this whistle-stop tour of manorial records. There are many, many more records to explore that could help you with your own research, and I hope this has given you the appetite to explore them in more detail. So have fun with it.